Here they are, the top 10 jokes of the year. Number 10.
An old farmer is sitting on his front porch watching the sunrise when he sees a neighbor kid walk by carrying a spool of something metallic under his arm. "Hey boy, what you got there?" "Chicken wire." "Well, what are you going to do with that?" "Well, I'm going to catch some chickens." "You fool, you can't catch chickens with chicken wire." Well, the boy laughs and keeps on walking. That evening at sunset, the boy walks by, dragging behind him 30 chickens caught in the chicken wire. The next morning, the old man sees the boy walking by with a shiny roll of something. "Hey boy, what you got there?" "Well, I got some duct tape." "What are you going to do with that?" "I'm going to catch me some ducks." "You fool, you can't catch ducks with duct tape." Well, the boy laughs, keeps on moving. That evening at sunset, boy walks by, trailing 30 ducks behind him, caught in a long trail of duct tape. Well, the next morning, the old man sees the boy walking by, carrying a branch behind him. "Hey boy, what you got there?" "Well, it's a pussy willow." "Wait a second. Let me get my hat."
Number 9. There was a farmer who had a wife who nagged him unmercifully. From morning till night, she was always complaining about something. The only time he got any relief was when he was out plowing the field with his old mule, so he tried to plow a lot. One day he was out plowing the field, and his wife brought him a lunch. So he sat down on a stump and started to eat his lunch. Well, immediately his wife began pestering him, nagging and complaining. It just went on and on. All of a sudden, the old mule lashed out with both hind feet, kicked her right in the back of the head, and dropped her on the spot. Well, at the funeral a couple of days later, the minister noticed something rather odd. When a woman mourner would approach the farmer, he would listen for a minute, then he would nod his head in agreement. But when a man mourner approached him, he'd listen for a minute, and then he'd shake his head in disagreement. Well, this was so consistent, the minister decided to ask the farmer about it. So after the funeral, the minister spoke to the farmer and said, "Wonder why you nod your head and agreed with all the women, but always shook your head and disagreed with all the men?" Well, farmer says, "Well, the women would come up and say something about how nice my wife looked or how pretty her dress was, so I'd nod my head in agreement." "Well, and what about the men? What did they ask?" "Oh, they wanted to know if the mule was for rent." Number 8.
Well, there was a blonde city girl, and she married a farmer. Well, one morning on the farm, he was on his way out to the fields, and the farmer says to her, "Hey, hon, the cow breeding man is coming over to impregnate one of our cows today. I drove a nail into the 2x4 just above the cow's stall in the barn. You show him which cow it is when he gets here, okay?" So the farmer leaves for the fields. Well, after a while, the cow breeding man knocks on the door, and she takes him down to the barn. Well, they walk along the rows of cows, and when she sees the nail, she tells him, "This is the one, this one right here." Well, terribly impressed by what he thought was just a ditzy blonde, the guy says, "How did you know that this is the cow to be bred?" "Well, that's simple, by the nail over the stall." The man says, What's the nail for?" "I don't know, buddy. I guess it's to hang your pants on. Good luck."
Number 7.
One day, a farmer walked into a bar and asked the bartender for the strongest thing in the bar. "What's wrong, fella?" asked the bartender. Some things you just can't explain," said the farmer. "Well, try me. I'm a bartender." "All right, fine. I was out milking my cow this morning, and I filled the bucket clear up to the top. Well, that dumb cow knocked it down with her left leg. So I grabbed some string, and I tied that left leg up. Well, then I milked her again, and that stupid cow knocked it down with her right leg. So I grabbed some string, and I tied up her right leg. Well, then I milked her again. Well, this cow knocked it down with her tail. This time I was out of string, so I decided to use my belt. So I tied the tail up with my belt. Well, just then my pants fell down, and then my wife walked in. You're right, said the bartender. You're on your own, buddy. Some things you cannot explain.
Number 6. For over a year, a man lived next to a beautiful woman who was stunning in every way. He could never find the courage to speak to her except for a quick hello here and there. One day she unexpectedly showed up on his doorstep wearing the most revealing outfit he'd ever seen. Well, he answered the door and she immediately put her arms around his neck. She was pulling him closer and obviously making a move, and he was getting more excited as his dreams are finally coming true. All of a sudden, she looked up and said, "Quick, let's go inside. I think I hear somebody coming." So they stepped in the door, and she looked at him and asked, "So, do you like what you see? What do you think my best feature is?" Well, the man thought and looked her up and down and said, "I'd have to say your ears." "What?" she said. "I work out 7 days a week. I have a perfect body. How could my ears be my most exceptional feature?" "Well," the guy said, "remember when we were outside on the porch and you thought you heard somebody coming?" Yeah, that was me." Number 5. So my wife and I went to the state fair, and one of the first exhibits we stopped at was the breeding bulls. We went up to the first pen, and there was a sign that said, "This bull mated 50 times last year." My wife nudged me in the ribs, smiled, and said, "He mated 50 times last year." So we walked over to the second pen, had a sign that said, "This bull mated 150 times last year." My wife gave me a healthy jab to the ribs, grinned, and says, "Wow, that's more than twice a week. You could learn something from that one." Well, on the door to the third pen was a sign that said, "This bull mated 365 times last year." Well, my wife was so excited that her elbow nearly broke my ribs, and she said, "That's once a day, honey. You could really learn a lot from this one." So I looked at her and I said, "Why don't you go over and ask any of them if it was the same old cow they mated with?" Anyways, Doc says I should make a full recovery from my attack and should be out of here in about 2 weeks. Number 4. A guy was on a flight home when he noticed a parrot sitting in the seat next to him. Well, the beautiful stewardess made her way to them and offered up a few drinks. The man says, "Yes, ma'am. May I please have a coffee?" The parrot yells, "Yeah, and get me a double whiskey, you fat cow." Well, she walks off and returns with the whiskey, but she forgot the man's coffee. Well, she apologized and turned to get the coffee when the parrot squawks, "Yeah, and get me another whiskey, you ugly hound." Well, with that, the stewardess is pretty shaken up and returns with the whiskey, but again forgets the coffee. Well, the man, having seen the success of the bird, says, "Listen, lady, I asked you for coffee twice now. Now get your stupid lazy butt back there and get me a cup of coffee." With that, the full cabin crew pulls the man and the parrot from their seats and throws them out the emergency exit. Well, as they're hurtling through the air towards the ground, the parrot says, "You know, for a guy who can't fly, you sure got a smart-ass mouth." Number 3. A guy walks into a store, buys a condom, then walks out of the store laughing hysterically. The owner thinks that it's a little weird, but hey, there's no law preventing weird people from buying condoms. Maybe it's a good thing. Well, the next day the man comes back to the store, buys another condom, and once again he leaves the store laughing uncontrollably. Well, this piques the interest of the owner. What's so funny about buying a rubber anyways, he thinks. So he tells his young clerk, "Hey, if this guy ever comes back, I want you to follow him, see where he goes after he leaves." Well, sure enough, the next day the laugher is back. He buys the condom and starts cracking up. Then he leaves. Well, the owner tells the clerk to go follow the guy. About an hour later, the clerk comes back to the store. Well,
Did you follow him? Where did he go? Asks the owner. My clerk says, well, honestly, he went to your wife's house.
Number 2. A young guy was in need of a job and he came across a listing for a bikini waxer. What? He thought. This has got to be a joke. So he calls the number on the listing and a man answers. Yeah, the guy says, I'm calling about the bikini waxer job. Is this real? I assure you it is, sir. Okay, first question for you to be considered. Are you married? No, I'm a single guy. Well, that's good to know. A lot of our clients get nervous around married men. Next, you got a passport? Well, indeed I do. Ah, that's good. Sometimes we have to send you to tropical locations. Well, finally, would you be comfortable waxing the bikini line of supermodels and famous swimsuit models, all while staying discreet? Absolutely. I would be discreet and charming. Okay, well, it seems that you qualify. Are you interested in the job? Absolutely, the guy says. All right, go ahead and book yourself a flight to Dallas. Wow, is that where my first client is? Nope. That's where the line starts for the interview in Los Angeles. Number 1. The IRS decided they were going to audit Grandpa, and they summoned him to the IRS office. Well, the IRS auditor was not surprised when Grandpa showed up with his attorney. The auditor said, well, sir, you've got an extravagant lifestyle and no full-time employment, which you explained by saying you win money by gambling. Now, I'm not sure the IRS finds that believable. Well, I'm a great gambler, said Grandpa. I can prove it. Well, how about a demonstration? The auditor thinks for a second and says, all right, go ahead. Well, Grandpa says, I'll bet you $1,000 I can bite my own eye. The auditor thinks for a little bit and says, all right, it's a bet. So Grandpa removes his glass eye and bites it. The auditor's jaw drops. Grandpa says, now I'll bet you $2,000 I can bite my other eye. The auditor can tell that Grandpa isn't blind, so he takes the bet. Well, Grandpa removes his dentures and bites his good eye. Well, the stunned auditor realizes he's wagered and lost $3,000, and Grandpa's attorney's a witness, starts to get a little nervous. You want to go double or nothing, Grandpa says? I'll bet you $6,000 I can stand on one side of your desk and pee into the wastebasket on the other side, never get a drop anywhere in between. The auditor, twice burned, is pretty cautious, but he looks carefully and decides there's no way this old guy could possibly manage that, so he agrees. Well, Grandpa stands up beside the desk and unzips. Although he strains pretty mightily, he can't make the stream reach the wastebasket on the other side. So he pretty much goes all over the auditor's desk. Well, the auditor leaps up with joy and realizes he just turned a major loss into a huge win. But Grandpa's own attorney moans and puts her head in her hands. Are you okay? The auditor asks. Not really, said the attorney. This morning when Grandpa told me he'd been summoned for an audit, he bet me $25,000 that he could come in here and piss all over your desk and you'd be happy about it. Hey folks, did you like them? Did you hate them? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks, and we'll catch you next time.